Tonight, that major winter storm disrupting life across a big part of the country. Snow and sleet causing hundreds of crashes in the south, some turning deadly. Thousands of flights canceled and more than 63,000 customers without power in Texas. At least one reported tornado touching down in Alabama. Snow and ice now moving into the northeast. Boston already closing schools for tomorrow. We have the track. Also tonight, the leader of ISIS killed in a U.S. raid in Syria. U.S. troops on the ground also battling al-Qaeda fighters. The White House calling it all a success. But are we seeing the resurgence of ISIS years after former President Trump declared victory over that terror group? Sarah Palin versus the New York Times. The former Alaska governor in court today as her libel trial against the newspaper begins. Palin's own lawyer now acknowledging the case will be, quote, an uphill battle. The new body camera footage released in the search for a missing Colorado woman the moment police first arrived at her home following her disappearance. What her husband, who has since been charged in the case, told responding officers. Fishermen rescued the three men pulled from freezing water after nearly an hour. How a woman looking out her window helped save their lives. And baby after Beijing, the Olympian set to compete in the Winter Games, but his pregnant wife due any minute here in the States. Their journey to parenthood thousands of miles apart. Top Story starts right now. Good evening. I'm Kate Snow in for Tom Llamas. Tonight we begin Top Story with that deadly winter storm marching east. Several school districts in New England already closing for tomorrow. Heavy snow, ice, and freezing rain causing a mess on the roads in several states. Missouri State Highway Patrol responding to nearly 500 crashes today, including at least one that was deadly. New video showing damage in central Alabama, where a reported tornado touched down just a few hours ago. And in Texas, tens of thousands of people without power as freezing temperatures settle in. NBC's Morgan Chesky is in Dallas and leads us off tonight.
Tonight, a frigid blast plunging nearly 100 million Americans into a deep freeze and even spawning rare winter tornadoes. New images from Sawyerville, Alabama, capturing homes shredded from an afternoon twister.
Very scary.
The tornado part of a system stretching from Texas to New England, dumping snow and freezing rain.
We were doing 35 and sliding, had to call it.
Icy conditions behind this Illinois pileup, with jackknife semis blocking traffic for hours. Nationwide, 5,000 flights canceled today. In Texas, the sub-freezing temps also dishing out a major test for the state's power grid, crippled during last year's storm that left more than 200 people dead.
We are dealing with one of the most significant icing events that we've had in the state of Texas in at least several decades. The Texas electric grid is the most reliable and resilient that it's ever been.
Officials say winterized plants and extra reserves are keeping the grid intact, but icy buildup on trees and power lines is causing local outages for thousands.
Oh no, not again. That was my first instinct.
Marlon Richardson still has power for now, but last year spent 4 days huddled in a sleeping bag with little food or water.
Where did last year's storm leave you?
With a new mindset to be prepared the next time.
The real test will come Friday, when demand for electricity is expected to peak. And even in winter-hardy Massachusetts, multiple cities are already shutting down schools Friday as this storm now plows its way north.
And Morgan joins us now from Dallas. Morgan, what more can you tell us about those winter tornadoes?
Yeah, Kate, we know they've struck at least one small community in Alabama known as Sawyerville. It's about 70 miles south of Birmingham. We've seen images from that community of homes shredded by this rare winter twister that appears to have struck mid-afternoon. Damage tools are still coming in. There are reports of individuals trapped inside damaged buildings, but much more to come as authorities share details. Kate?
And Morgan, the Texas power grid, so much fear about that. How's it holding up right now?
As of this moment in time, Kate, the grid is acting as intended, and officials credit extra reserves for that and extra winterization methods for their power generators. However, the real test is not going to come until Friday morning. That's when temperatures are going to plunge into incredible lows. Wind chills in Amarillo alone, Kate, expected to hit -16. So all eyes go about 12 hours from now to see how well this grid will hold up. Kate?
-16. Morgan, thank you. Wow. Watches and warnings in effect for the Northeast as well. They're bracing for another round of winter weather. For what to expect and when, I want to bring in NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns. Bill, what do we got?
Now, Kate, unfortunately, we're hearing news from that tornado in Alabama, and it's not good. The National Weather Service in Alabama is now reporting 1 fatality and 8 injuries. And of those 8 injuries, they're saying that 3 are critical. So, again, we've had 1 reported tornado near the Sawyerville, Alabama area, and now we're hearing of 1 fatality. The second level of 1 home was completely destroyed. A couple other mobile homes were moved off their foundation. So, yeah, a sad story from this incredibly large and long duration storm. So let me show you the latest on our tornado threat, because it is beginning to end. We haven't had any reported tornadoes in about the last 2 to 3 hours. But on the map, you'll see that tornado was reported just north of Denapolis and just to the southwest of Birmingham. That was the area of greatest concern. And that tornado watch does continue still from Montgomery to Troy. It should be expiring here shortly. They're probably just still monitoring it to make sure nothing else spins up. So what are we left with? What a mess this has been and still is. 102 million people still in these winter weather alerts from Texas all the way up through the Northeast. This is how it plays out tonight. All of this mess continues. The blue is snow. The pink is freezing rain. We have a horrible ice storm situation in Tennessee with 150,000 people without power, many of them in between Nashville and the Memphis area. Tomorrow, that ice will be through West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and tomorrow morning through southern New England, a treacherous morning commute. You mentioned that the Boston schools are already out for tomorrow. They expect freezing rain for a good portion of the day. Here's that ice forecast. You do not want to be in the blue. Once you get above a quarter inch, you have a chance of losing power. That's southern Ohio, central Pennsylvania, and southern New England. As far as the heavy snow goes, that's really confined to the northern New England sections in western New York. It's a big snowstorm, but you have the equipment to deal with it there. When we head to Texas, this is a different story. Freezing rain right now. Victoria. In Houston, they're starting to get some freezing rain. And Houston Public Schools just called for a rare snow and ice day tomorrow. So the kids are rejoicing. You do not have to go to school in Houston tomorrow because of the snow and the ice. And it'll be cold. And here's the question. Have they improved the electricity grids? Because demand will be high tomorrow morning, Kate. Temperatures in the teens and 20s throughout the entire state. This will easily be the highest energy demand day of the winter, and we'll see how it responds during the day tomorrow.
Yeah, Bill, Morgan was talking about that too, saying they say they've made all these improvements. Let's hope, right? Bill, thank you. Appreciate it. Let's turn to the other big headline tonight. The leader of ISIS dead, along with at least a dozen other people after a U.S. military operation by special forces in Syria. Courtney Cuby has the latest from the Pentagon.
Daylight and the aftermath of a nighttime U.S. military raid in northwestern Syria targeting and killing the leader of ISIS. His name, Abu Ibrahim al-Hashimi al-Qurayshi.
Thanks to the bravery of our troops, this horrible terrorist leader is no more.
The mission, months in the making. The U.S. positively identified his location in early December, and after weeks of practicing, President Biden gave the military the green light on Tuesday. Overnight, U.S. special operators arrived near the compound via helicopters, moving to the building where Qurayshi was believed to be living, closing in. They used bullhorns, urging everyone to leave. Before the U.S. military even set foot inside, a massive explosion from the 3rd floor. Officials say the ISIS leader detonating a bomb, killing himself, his wife, and 2 children. Meanwhile, on the 2nd floor, one of his deputies fired on U.S. troops and was killed along with his wife and child. Officials say no U.S. troops were injured or killed during the mission. Neighbors didn't know the ISIS leader was living among them, saying, "The guys who lived here were renting. We don't know who they were." With civilians in the area, the U.S. military chose a raid rather than an airstrike.
The president was trying to avoid civilian harm.
A maintenance issue grounded one U.S. helicopter, and troops blew it up before departing Syria after 2 hours on the ground, the administration calling the mission a success.
It sent a strong message to terrorists around the world. We will come after you and find you.
And Courtney's with us now from the Pentagon. Courtney, what do we know about how long U.S. forces were actually on the ground, and what kind of intelligence were they able to gather?
So from the time they touched down in those helicopters to the time they took off again was about 2 hours. Now, that means that's from the time they landed, they walked, or they ran probably on foot to the building. That was the entire mission there from the time that there was an explosion. They went in, they exploited the site, meaning they gathered up any intelligence that they could, and then they ran back to the helicopters and were gone. So that was a full 2 hours. What we know they got were some electronic devices that the U.S. is now examining that U.S. troops gathered up and they believe may have actually belonged to the ISIS leader Abu al-Qureshi, Kate.
All right, Courtney, thank you. Let's turn to the tension in Ukraine and the condemnation from the Kremlin over the U.S. plan to send 3,000 troops to the region. As those American troops prepare to deploy, U.S. intelligence officials said today they've uncovered a plot by Russia to stage a Ukrainian attack as a pretext to invade the country. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel reports from the front lines in eastern Ukraine.
As Russia builds up forces around Ukraine, U.S. officials are warning of a possible Russian plot to create a pretext for an invasion, a propaganda campaign that would try to prove Ukraine is attacking Russian speakers here, complete with a video showing the faked aftermath of a Ukrainian attack.
As part of this fake attack, we believe that Russia would produce a very graphic propaganda video, which would include corpses. And actors that would be depicting mourners.
The Kremlin calling the accusations false. Meanwhile, U.S. troops tonight are heading to Eastern Europe. Here's NBC's Kerry Sanders.
Today, 1,700 plus soldiers with the 82nd Airborne loaded up and shipped out to Poland, which shares a border with Ukraine. They were given less than 18 hours to get ready, say goodbye to their families, with no indication of when they'll be home.
The Pentagon calls the deployment temporary.
Tomorrow, Putin travels to China to meet President Xi and attend the Olympics opening ceremony. The last time China hosted the Games in 2008, Putin carved off a piece of Georgia on the Black Sea, claiming he was defending the pro-Russian community there. Richard Engel, NBC News, Eastern Ukraine.
With the international community on edge ahead of the opening ceremony for the Olympics, we want to bring in NBC News political contributor, former Deputy National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes is with us. Ben, good to see you. So these claims, the U.S. saying they uncovered this elaborate plot involving actors that the Russians would use as a pretext to invade. First of all, does that surprise you? And does that mean that an invasion is sort of inevitable? If they're going to those lengths, are they going to invade?
Well, I think, first of all, the idea that Russia would have disinformation campaigns at the ready is not a surprise. And look, during 2014, when they were moving into parts of eastern Ukraine to support separatists there, you'll recall, for instance, there was a civilian airliner shot down over Ukraine. It was shot down over the areas controlled by Russian-backed separatists where Russian military advisors were present. Russia put out all manner of theories. The Ukrainians actually shot down the plane. The Americans shot down the plane. They flooded the internet with this. So this is part of their toolkit. And I think what the administration is trying to do is get ahead of the likelihood that if there is a Russian invasion, whether it's this particular really extreme form of disinformation or whether it's other claims that they might launch against the fact that Ukraine is actually the aggressors, that's not a surprise. If you look at Russian state media these days, all it is filled with is allegations that Ukraine is poised to attack Russia, or that the United States is supporting Ukraine and attacking Russia. I think the administration is trying to get ahead of that. And yes, if there are all these indications that Russia is preparing a pretext for an action, that suggests that the continued likelihood is some form of Russian military operation in Ukraine.
So high likelihood at this point.
I think so. I mean, it's still possible, though, that we don't know the scale of the military intervention. And there's something different than a full-scale invasion in which Russia seeks to conquer Kiev, the capital, and topple the government, which they have the capacity to do. They have a lot of troops in neighboring Belarus, which is not that far away from Kiev. But they could also, frankly, use the fact that they've scared the international community into the idea of this full-scale war to make it seem like a lesser offense if they simply move more Russian troops into parts of eastern Ukraine where they've already been active to try to solidify their gains there. We just don't know how far Putin is willing to push the envelope at this point.
Ben, I want to turn you back to the ISIS story, the leader who was killed this morning in Syria. And can you put it into context for us? Could someone else within ISIS pick up where that leader left off? Or is this a really significant blow to their network?
Well, I think it's likely that they'll have a new leader, that they plan for contingencies within groups like ISIS where a leadership is decapitated. But the reality is it still matters. This wasn't a figure that had the iconic standing of a Baghdadi who was a previous leader of ISIS, but he's been a key figure. I got to know about him back in 2014 when we assessed that he was responsible for kind of masterminding an effort to commit genocide against the Yazidi minority group in Iraq. Clearly, this is the one person among all ISIS operatives who will have knowledge, would have had knowledge of how they're moving their finances around, what plots might have been in train. And just as important as taking this guy out is the reality, as you talked about in that report, that if we were able to get hard drives, phones, information from this site, that could give us significant insight into who the next leader of ISIS would be, what the leadership structure is, how do they communicate with operatives in the field. So it's both the victory, frankly, of taking this terrorist off the battlefield, but it's also the capacity to learn from the information gathered at his compound so that we can stay ahead of whatever ISIS might do next.
It strikes me, Ben, that ISIS has been off the radar for a lot of Americans for a while now. We don't talk about it that much on the nightly news. What does this raid tell us about the state of ISIS? Have we just been looking somewhere else while they've continued to establish themselves?
Well, since their high point in 2014 and 2015, they really have been degraded. They haven't been eliminated, but they no longer hold territory. Remember, at their height, they were referring to themselves as a caliphate, and they literally governed large swaths of Syria and Iraq. And that freedom of action allowed them to project power and to inspire or plot attacks into Europe and even to threaten the United States. I think what's happened is they've been degraded to the point where their capacity to mount that kind of sustained threat in the West, that has been significantly reduced. However, what we've seen in recent days and weeks is that there's still a military force in a terrorist presence inside of Syria. And you saw recently a pretty complex operation by ISIS to try to free several hundred ISIS detainees in a prison in Syria. So there's still a force there. What we have to do is prevent them from reconstituting. And an attack like this, an operation like this, is very important to preventing them from getting back on their feet and keeping them, frankly, on their heels so that they're not allowed to project power outside of these small areas that they're reduced to right now.
Ben Rhodes, always good to have you with us. Thanks so much. Back here at home, President Biden today visiting New York amid a surge of violent crime that has the city on edge. The president vowing to crack down on rogue gun dealers to stop the flow of weapons into New York City. Our Gabe Gutierrez sat down with one family dealing with the devastation of gun violence firsthand, and he pressed New York City's mayor on what he's doing to help.
Under pressure to do more about surging crime, President Biden today in New York City, meeting new Mayor Eric Adams and others.
We want to crack down on the flow of firearms used to commit violence. That includes taking on and shutting down rogue gun dealers.
Crime is already up 39% here this year. Shootings up 32%. Rape 27%. Even nonviolent crime like car thefts up 92%.
So for you, this rise in crime is real.
This rise in crime is not only professional, but it's personal and it's real.
Mayor Adams, a former police captain, telling us he's rolling out new steps to combat gun violence, including using facial recognition technology to identify suspects and deploying more cops on the streets.
Does defunding the police work?
No, it does not, and it's the wrong bumper sticker.
It's something he and the president agree on.
The answer is not to defund the police.
And days ago, Adams met with the new progressive Manhattan district attorney, who sparked controversy, saying he will not prosecute certain crimes to promote alternatives to jail. Moves slammed by police, including the widow of a fallen officer at her husband's funeral.
I know you were tired of these laws, especially the ones from the new DA. I hope he's watching you speak through me right now.
Is the Manhattan DA going too far?
I believe he has to make the determination. We are going to arrest those who break the law, and it's up to the DAs to do their part of this bargain to properly prosecute those who break the law.
It sounds like to me that you think he's going too far. Incorrect?
No, that's not my opinion. Doesn't matter here. I'm going to use all the tools. I'm going to use all the tools that are available to me to keep the city safe.
Just days ago, New York rocked again by this shooting at a Brooklyn mall. Before that, another in a Bronx emergency room.
I don't believe it. I don't want to accept it.
Christine Nieves' 19-year-old daughter, Crystal, was working the night shift last month at a Burger King in Harlem when a gunman robbed her. She handed over $100 from the register. he shot and killed her anyway.
I'm not okay. I can't sleep. I don't really eat, and I don't feel safe.
What's your message for President Biden? ¿Cuál es su mensaje para el presidente Biden?
That there's a problem with guns. I don't know where they come from.
And Gabe is with us now. So heartbreaking. You talk about Democrats sort of changing their message here and taking a new tactic. Why now?
Yeah, it's certainly a shift. I mean, Eric Adams and President Biden have both said before that they didn't support defunding the police, but now they're really emphasizing it. And of course, it's an election year. Republicans are seizing on this crime issue. And Kate, according to a new Gallup poll, just 24% of Americans say that they're satisfied with current policies to reduce crime. So clearly, Democrats think there's a lot of room for improvement, Kate.
All right, Gabe, thank you. Now to the court battle kicking off today in New York. Former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin suing the New York Times for defamation. The company admitting to publishing inaccurate information about her, but calling it a mistake and one they corrected. The trial was postponed after Palin tested positive for COVID, and it comes as she has been flouting pandemic restrictions here in New York. Priscilla Thompson has more.
Tonight, Sarah Palin back in court.
What am I trying to accomplish? Justice.
The former Alaska governor appeared in a federal courtroom in Manhattan to duke it out with the New York Times over a 2017 op-ed that Palin says hurt her career as a political commentator. How strong is her case?
I don't think her case is very strong, just because the standard is so high.
Something Palin's own attorney acknowledged in court today, calling the suit a, quote, uphill battle. Palin claims she was defamed in the editorial that she alleges implied a link between her political action committee and a 2011 mass shooting in Arizona that killed 6 people and severely injured former U.S. Representative Gabby Giffords. The Times corrected the op-ed 2 days after publishing, saying it, quote, incorrectly stated that a link existed, when in fact no such link was established. More than a week later, Palin sued, seeking unspecified damages. It's very rare for libel claims against a news organization involving a public figure to reach trial. What would Palin have to prove in order to win?
She has to prove, because she's a public figure, that these statements were made with actual malice. It's a very high bar.
The Times argues it wasn't that, but rather a mistake, telling NBC News in a statement, quote, we published an editorial about an important topic that contained an inaccuracy. We set the record straight with a correction, and that public figures should not be permitted to use libel suits to punish unintentional errors by news organizations.
Sarah Palin's libel trial against the New York Times has been postponed.
The trial is getting underway after a nearly 2-week delay because Palin tested positive for COVID. The Republican has been an outspoken opponent of the vaccine.
It'll be over my dead body that I'll have to get a shot. I will not do it.
Sending shockwaves when she was spotted dining inside a Manhattan restaurant where proof of vaccination is required by the city before testing positive. Then again in an outdoor setup after her 2 positive test results were revealed, when public health guidance is to isolate. Palin did not respond to NBC's request for comment. Her defamation suit against the Times could upend long-standing safeguards in the media industry. Could this case set a new precedent?
It will not set a new precedent in the trial court level, but if the Supreme Court decides to overturn the 1964 case, New York Times versus Sullivan, it could set a new standard. That's the big threat to the news world.
And Priscilla Thompson is here with us in the studio. What else happened in court today?
Well, both sides delivered their opening statements. Sarah Palin's attorney acknowledging that this is not going to be an easy case to win, but says that the New York Times has a, quote, history of bias against Palin and Republicans. Now, the New York Times, on the other hand, argued that this op-ed was critical of both Democrats and Republicans and that the paper acted as quickly as possible to correct the mistake.
Priscilla, thank you so much for covering it. Appreciate it. Still ahead tonight, firefight. The new video as firefighters gain access to that burning plant in North Carolina for the first time. The latest concern prompting school closures and water advisories, plus the deadly shooting on a Greyhound bus, what we're learning about the suspected gunman. And body camera footage released in the search for a missing Colorado woman, what her husband suggested to officers when they arrived at their home. Stay with us. Back now with new developments in the nearly 2-year-old case of a Colorado woman who went missing on Mother's Day. Never before seen body cam footage capturing the beginning of the investigation. Now her husband is in custody, charged with her murder. Jesse Kirsch has more.
Suzanne Morphew disappeared on Mother's Day nearly 2 years ago. Tonight, this body camera video newly released by the Fremont County Court shows some of the first moments of the search for the Colorado mother of 2 when she was reported missing after a bike ride.
Something's up with the front tire.
Where is it? Where's the bike?
Oh, it's right there.
Her husband, who appears distraught in the video, at one point asking if his wife was attacked by wildlife.
There's not really that much damage to the bike. That's the thing.
Lion?
Yeah, it was just like lion.
No lion? Mountain lion?
Investigators asked the husband to show them clothing she wore that day. In the weeks after, Suzanne Morphew's image appeared all over the community, the FBI even helping with the search. Husband Barry Morphew then pleading on Facebook for his wife's safe return.
We love you, we miss you, your girls need you. No questions asked. However much they want, I will do whatever it takes to get you back.
But nearly a year after her disappearance, Barry Morphew was charged in the murder of his wife, even though a body has still never been recovered.
I'm the one that considers how strong my case is before I bring charges, and I wouldn't bring charges unless I was confident.
The now public body cam footage shows the Morphews' marriage may not have been perfect. A person identifying himself as the boyfriend of one of the couple's daughters interviewed by investigators the day of her disappearance.
I know this is a weird question, but do Barry and Suzanne get along pretty well?
The boyfriend pauses and looks at his father before answering.
You can answer honestly.
You know, I think they've had some problems.
Okay.
Yeah, in the past.
Like just normal
husband and wife type deal.
They like talk about separating or anything
they
like
have,
that?
Yeah.
Morphew is fighting the charges. He pleaded not guilty.
Barry, how does it feel? How does it feel to be out?
His daughters, seen here with him, have stood by his side.
And Jesse's with us. So the husband's saying he's innocent. There's no body that's been found. What are prosecutors basing their case on?
Investigators laying out their evidence in a more than 100-page affidavit. They claim that Barry Morphew allegedly incapacitated his wife, staged a crime scene, Kate, and provided an alibi that just didn't add up.
All right, Jesse, thank you. When we come back, another Tesla recall. Concern over a seatbelt alarm this time, affecting more than 800,000 vehicles. What customers need to know. And billionaire versus the bridge. The Dutch now preparing to dismantle a historic steel bridge for Jeff Bezos' mega yacht. The details up next. Now to Top Stories news feed, and we begin with a deadly shooting on a Greyhound bus in California. Police say a 21-year-old man opened fire at random when the bus was parked at a gas station 65 miles north of Sacramento. At least one person was killed, several injured, including a pregnant woman and an 11-year-old girl. Authorities say the man was acting erratically on the bus and when he was taken into custody at a nearby Walmart. Firefighters have been able to access that fire at the fertilizer plant in North Carolina for the first time in days. New helmet camera footage shows the extensive damage inside the burned-out plant in Winston-Salem. Rain helping to fight the fire there. Officials say they are less concerned about a potential explosion now, but the thick smoke has prompted school closures and water advisories. Thousands of residents are still asked to stay away from the area. 3 fishermen were rescued from freezing water after their boat sank off the coast of Massachusetts. Video from police shows the 3 clinging onto the boom of the submerged boat. Authorities say an eyewitness called 911 after watching them take on water from her window. The men, who were not wearing life vests, were in the water for about an hour. They were taken to a nearby hospital. They are expected to be okay. The National Archives will turn over records from former Vice President Mike Pence to the January 6th committee on Capitol Hill. The agency says it will provide the congressional panel with vice presidential records despite efforts by former President Trump to block their release. Those records set to be delivered by March 3rd. And Tesla is issuing another recall. The company now recalling more than 800,000 vehicles because the seatbelt reminder alarm may not sound. The recall covers a mix of sedans and SUVs made from 2017 to 2020. Tesla says it will fix the problem with a software update this month. You can find more information on NBCnews.com. Now Now to news rocking one of the world's biggest tech companies. Stock prices for Facebook's parent company Meta plunging more than 26% today. That's the biggest single-day drop in the company's history as it forecasted weaker than expected revenue growth in the next quarter. CNBC.com technology editor Steve Kovac joins me now. Steve, today's losses, I'm told, are set to shave more than $230 billion from Meta's valuation. What drove that huge slide today?
Yeah, you can blame Apple for all of this, Kate. You know that pop-up you've been seeing on your iPhone the last several months saying, do you want to block from being tracked by these apps?
Yeah.
Well, enough people turned that on for Facebook that it really hurt their ability to target ads towards you. And therefore, people who sell stuff, people who make ads to convince you to buy stuff in your news feed, they said, we're not going to take it anymore. We're going to go to Google instead and spend all our money there. And that's what we saw with Facebook this week.
Other social media companies fell today too. How did they get caught up in Facebook's dragnet?
Yeah, that's exactly right. When Facebook sneezes, the entire social media ecosystem catches a cold. So we saw shares of Snap, Pinterest, Twitter all fall just because of Facebook warning about this slower than expected revenue growth. At the same time, though, Snap reported earnings and boom, the stock is up 60%. They reported their first ever profit. So the thing about markets, Kate, is you never know what's going to happen.
Oh, that's for sure. So you mentioned the increased Apple privacy features. There's also been mention of decreased advertising budgets right now. Those things are tough to overcome. Do investors feel like Meta has kind of lost its way? I mean, dare we say, is it kind of the beginning of an end for Meta?
Well, Kate, I think it's too early to say the beginning of the end. You know, Facebook goes through crisis after crisis, and it's weathered them all. So there's no reason to think it can't weather this one. But the question is, where is the next level of growth going to come from? How can they make money beyond just showing ads to you in your news feed or your Instagram feed? Mark Zuckerberg's answer, it's the metaverse, those futuristic VR glasses that we've been hearing all about for the last year or so. Facebook is making a really big bet on that, and that's what's coming next, and that's what they think the next growth is, Kate.
Can't wait for those glasses. Okay, thanks so much. An update tonight on that lawsuit shaking up the NFL. The league is now investigating accusations from former Miami Dolphins head coach Brian Flores, who says Dolphins owner Steve Ross offered him $100,000 for every game he lost. Ross was allegedly trying to tank the team's record to get higher draft picks in the future, a charge he denies. We want to bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos to break down what these accusations could mean for the NFL. Danny, do you think the allegations laid out by Flores warrant a larger investigation, possibly by a federal prosecutor? And if so, what would they be looking for? And where might the Dolphins or the NFL be violating the actual law?
If there's something more than just the allegations in the complaint, then it's worthy of an investigation. However, there's no clear indication that a crime was committed. Far more likely, it appears from the allegations, that some allegedly unethical sporting conduct has gone on. And by that, I mean that not all anti-competitive behavior in professional sports or even athletics is necessarily illegal. A lot of it can be, especially when it involves sports betting. But there really is only one federal law that affects or goes to paying someone off to, for example, tank or take a dive, or whatever you want to call it in the vernacular. So there is really one federal law that addresses this, but it's hazy, and it's not a kind of case that the feds bring very often. Now, that being said, the feds love cases like this. It involves famous people. It arguably involves something within their jurisdiction. The feds, and this is coming from a defense attorney, a jaded defense attorney, they love press conferences. They love getting involved in sports, anything high profile, celebrities. That is right up their alley. So look for the feds to be very interested in this.
And just to clarify, it would be more likely federal law if there were an alleged violation than like state or local law?
There are state laws that would address this. State fraud laws would address this kind of anti-competitive behavior. But I would look more likely to the federal government. They have the Sports Bribery Act. They have RICO. They have a number of other laws, including, any of the fraud laws that are very broad in scope. I've defended against these. They are really, really difficult to beat in court. So in all likelihood, given the broad interstate commerce aspect of this, I would look to the federal government to take the lead in this case.
Can I ask about regulation? Because, the NFL talks about protecting the integrity of their games. I was looking at their website. There's a whole section. They have a lot of rules. But if these allegations are true, with the introduction of sports gambling into the sport, could you envision more oversight coming in by state or federal officials?
Right. I mean, it's a kind of legal fiction that sports gambling has become ubiquitous around the country ever since the Supreme Court struck down or invalidated a federal law that prevented it, so to speak. Now it's just exploded in the country. And the idea that you can have all these, let's say, NFL, fantasy leagues, which are a form of gambling. I mean, the reality is the NFL just kind of pretends not to see the billions of dollars that are spent gambling on the NFL. So, look, yeah, the NFL talks about integrity, but I don't know that folks would say they have a fantastic track record in this area. Should they conduct their own internal investigation? Sure, these allegations are pretty serious. But, the NFL knows. They know that they incentivize this kind of conduct because they say to a team, hey, if you're not just bad, but if you're the worst, then we'll give you a fantastic draft pick. So what did you think was going to happen? I mean, what was the expectation when you incentivize coming in dead last? You're essentially dangling money or dangling prizes in front of a team and saying, hey, if you accidentally end up last, you may end up with the best player in football.
Danny, I'm going to leave it there. And nice to talk to you about something a little less serious than usual. Sports, anyway.
It's true.
Appreciate it. Turning now to top stories Global Watch. In Argentina, at least 20 people have died from tainted cocaine. Authorities believe the drugs that were sold in Buenos Aires were mixed with a toxic chemical that attacks the central nervous system. Dozens of people also hospitalized. Authorities are investigating if the batch was sabotaged by a rival gang. A historic bridge in the Netherlands will be dismantled to fit Jeff Bezos' super yacht. Officials in Rotterdam confirming they will temporarily remove the middle section of the nearly 100-year-old bridge so that Amazon founder's ship can pass through the waterway this summer. A Dutch company is building the 417-foot-long, $500 million vessel. It's expected to be the world's largest sailing yacht. And 4 top aides to UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson have resigned. The resignations include his chief of staff and his head of policy, who was a longtime ally of Johnson's. It comes after a report that multiple parties were held at Downing Street while the rest of the UK was under strict COVID-19 lockdowns. The investigation also finding a culture of excessive drinking and a, quote, failure of leadership. To a dire situation in Afghanistan now, rampant hunger and poverty there as the Taliban-led country struggles through a massive decline of foreign aid. Conditions are especially brutal for mothers and children. Sky News' Alex Crawford takes us inside a hospital struggling to help the most vulnerable, and we want to warn you that what she saw is quite disturbing.
In Afghanistan's most deprived province, nothing comes easy and everything's scarce. They're cramming babies onto beds in the province's main hospital. In some wards, it's standing room only. A measles outbreak is ripping through them. In the tiny, who have already poor immunity, measles can be a death sentence. The insecurities meant vaccines haven't been given. And there are claims it's the Taliban who prevented them. The Talib, now in charge of health services here, left school at 14. Not long ago, he was fighting foreign troops, and he blames others for the current mess. The previous president was the most corrupt person in the most corrupt government in the world, he tells us, and we have a lack of everything. That means those least able are losing this fight. Arezo's parents travelled hours to get help here at the main hospital, but their little daughter died, bitingly cold and aching with hunger. We're living in tents, her father says. There's no warm place, and that's why she died. We just couldn't keep her warm. There's no time for grief. They've 2 more children to keep alive. There are too many like Arezo who've perished, starving and cold. It never gets any easier. She's already lost 2 other children. Now Rizima's youngest is only just clinging to life. Kadia has a range of complications normally treated easily, and at the root of them all is poverty and malnutrition. Later the same night after filming this, Kadia also succumbed. Afghanistan's babies are dying at a shockingly high rate. There's no pain relief for 16-year-old Samaya. There are few medicines here, which partly explains why the country has one of the highest maternal and child mortality rates. Bring a towel, quickly, the doctor's calling. I'm really scared, the exhausted new mother says. She's worried for herself and her newborn son. She looks on as the midwives work fast now. Every second is going to count if this baby is going to live. He doesn't appear to be breathing. They frantically suck out the amniotic fluid which is threatening to drown him. He's taken to the resuscitation room where there's a rolling queue of babies needing help. Most of these medics are working for very little and have hardly been paid since the Taliban came to power and foreign aid suddenly stopped. But this little boy's battle to live is their fight too. Both mother and baby have somehow got through this. The next battle starts now, in a land where most are hungry. Alex Crawford, Sky News in Badghis.
Our thanks to Sky News for that. We'll be right back. Let's bring in NBC Sports host Carolyn Manno. Carolyn, thanks for being with us. I want to start with one of the athletes who is expected to win big. My daughter's a huge fan. We're talking about alpine skier Mikaela Shiffrin. Tell us what you think is coming.
Well, the big storyline, Kate, and it's great to be with you as well, for Mikaela Shiffrin is that this is nearly 2 years since the passing of her father. And so she is incredibly motivated and will be competing with him at the forefront of her mind. Since she's been in Beijing, she's on social media told everybody, you know, that her heart has been breaking, that it's something that she's going to be focused on. But the spotlight is squarely on her now. In the past, over the course of her career, she's shared that with Lindsey Vonn and Bodie Miller, some of the greats. Now, she not only looks to build upon the medals that she's already won, but she has a chance to win 5. And so the moment is right. I think her heart is a little bit heavy, but nobody is as prepared and motivated as she is. And over the last couple of years, she's worked on tweaking some of the things that have been considered weaknesses for her in the past. She's always been considered a slalom expert, a giant slalom expert. That's where she won gold the last time around. And now it's, can she put everything together? Is that speed going to be there? And I think all signs right now point to yes.
All right, I have to ask about snowboarder Shaun White. Everybody knows him because he is back for his fifth Olympics. How does he match up with this new generation?
Yes, it's been many years since the Flying Tomato, Kate, as I'm sure you recall. I mean,
I do.
He's an elder. Yeah, and a lot of sports fans do. He's the elder statesman now. I mean, this is something of a half-pipe victory lap for him. He's twice the age of a number of the guys that he's going to be going up against. And it's not unlike what we just saw with Tom Brady and his retirement and winning his first Super Bowl and being the youngest quarterback to do it and winning the last Super Bowl and being the oldest quarterback to ever do it. This is a chance for him to really just enjoy the moment. I think he felt a lot of pressure the last time around, pressure to win, pressure to prove to everybody that he could come back from injury and adversity. Now, from everything that we've observed, he is very much enjoying the ride. He's, posting on social media all the clothes that he's received, and he seems to be in a really healthy place mentally. So it's just going out, executing, making the United States proud, and hitting the half pipe one last time.
Yeah. Let me ask you about figure skating. Of course, Americans want the U.S. team to do, to get the gold, but the Russian Olympic Committee team seems to have a lot of power.
They're very powerful. You're spot on there, Kate. They're young, they're talented, they are fiercely competitive. And as Stephanie Goss just detailed, the team figure skating competition gets underway tonight in just a short time. And the United States and Japan are certainly contenders there. They're in the top half of the competitive group, I would say. But Russia is going to be very difficult to beat. And then when you think about the individual competition as well, I think all eyes are going to be focused on Nathan Chen. I mean, you talk about Shaun White not being in a pressure cooker anymore. The opposite is true for a skater like that who's looking for their first individual medal and has a bronze in the team event, but is hoping to have something of a redemption story as well. So the storylines are just absolutely everywhere, and the competition is going to be amazing. We can't wait.
Looking forward to it. I got to ask you one last thing. Curling. I love curling.
Oh, yes.
In Pyeongchang, I was there, and I went and watched in person, and I really got into it. What do we expect from that sport that really, only gets attention every 4 years?
Curling is the best, and that's why I'm glad that you love it, because America loves it. This is the ultimate every man, every woman, crack open a beer, grab a broom in your living room, meet us on CNBC every day at 5 o'clock for happy hour. That's what we're going to be. The Americans on the men's and women's side are very strong and talented. This is a very tough field to handicap. All of the different teams have an ability to go on a magical run. We saw what the men did last time around. That was unprecedented, and I think surprising for a lot of people. The American men are not surprising anybody anymore, and I know that the entire country is going to rally for them and root for them, and they do have a chance. I mean, the competition already kicked off with mixed doubles. Vicky Persinger and Chris Plies are off to something of a shaky start. They did win their first game, but you're never out of it till you're out of it in curling. So everybody just get ready for the ride and meet us on CNBC, because that's where the majority of the games are going to be, and we are just like raring to go.
All right, Carolyn Meno, great to have you with us. I really appreciate it. Have a great time watching the opening ceremonies. When we come back, we have another story from Beijing. The Olympian hoping to win big at the Winter Games, but also his biggest prize will be waiting for him back at home. Stay with us. Finally tonight, as we gear up for the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics, one Olympian is going in knowing that no matter what happens, he has a prize waiting for him back at home.
Olympic biathlon athlete Leif Nordgren is hoping for his Olympic glory, but he already knows he's going to miss the most important moment in his life.
I'm definitely excited to go to China and race, but yeah, at the same time, I'm even more excited, I think, to kind of get the Olympics over with and finally go home and kind of meet the new little one.
His wife Caitlin and their unborn baby thousands of miles away, and her due date is tomorrow, same day as the opening ceremonies. If there's ever been an excuse to miss the birth of your baby, this may be it.
When we found out that I was pregnant, did the math right away. I was like, ooh, early in November, that's not good timing for us. Bringing us a little bit of snow this morning.
Caitlin, a meteorologist at NBC5 in Vermont, has had to spend the last months of the pregnancy alone, with her husband competing and the heavy COVID restrictions in Beijing. Ever the optimist, she's still looking at the bright side.
There's a silver lining to everything, and one of them may be the fact that he's essentially in a little bit of a lockdown, and therefore he will be a little bit more available to answer my phone calls and things like that.
Leif has trained for years to win the gold. He competes in 5 days, but his biggest goal has now changed.
12 years of my life, like going after this, athletic dream, but the whole family and baby thing really puts everything into perspective.
Caitlin has spent her third trimester as a solo act, preparing the nursery and rooting for her husband. She thinks these few days are a small sacrifice. Win or lose in Beijing, Leif is coming home to his biggest prize.
Medal would be great, but he'll be coming home to a baby, so that's even better, no matter what.
It's just a due date. Maybe he'll be a little late, and then Leif can be here. Congrats to them, and best of luck. Thanks so much for watching Top Story. I'm Kate Snow here in New York. Have a great night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.